Today, I want to welcome Matthew Sanjari. He's the founder of Prime Consulting. One of the really interesting things in Matthew's story is he had a life-altering car accident, and it really changed the trajectory of his life. Some things positive, some things negative. He spent a lot of the next decade overcoming chronic pain, depression, and disability, but it also forced him to respond in a way of positivity. And part of that response was becoming a serial entrepreneur. Over Matthew's 15 years, he's seen how organizations can grow beyond their ability to run effectively. And part of what he does with Prime Consulting is build systems and safeguards against that. So Matthew's got a really diverse background. It's not your average entrepreneur's path. And so I'm really looking forward to today's discussion. Matthew, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Craig. I'm excited to delve in today.
Yeah. So car accident. So literally, I know absolutely nothing. What happened?
Okay, so to give people a bit of context, the accident happened about 12 years ago. So to set the stage a little bit, I was working full time, traveling across North America, had a great job doing public speaking. Felt like, really, really good life overall. And one night I was just driving home and late at night in the country, Canadian countryside, and two horses jumped out onto the road. And I don't know anything about horses. I don't know if you do, but they were Clydesdales. And
Oh, wow. Those are big horses.
yeah, and I was driving an SUV at the time, and they were bigger than my SUV. And so literally I slammed on the brakes, couldn't avoid it, absolutely just smashed them. The car a couple times rolled the whole bit. And before you knew it, again, we're in the country, right? So massive ditches on either side. When they ended up measuring, I was 3 inches away from dying. Like it was that crazy of an experience.
Oh my goodness. Now, I've met somebody who was in a car accident with a moose. And I met him 1 year after the accident, and he was celebrating being able to discern light from dark for the first time in a year.
Wow.
How, in terms of size, I mean, I know Clydesdales are big. How would you compare them to a moose?
Oh man. For sure, like in terms of height, they're pretty close, I would say. So the thing, like to give people the visual, I was driving a Honda CRV, and I remember looking at the horses, and the top of the horse was, I had to look up, and I'm already elevated. And so it just felt like I absorbed the entire weight of both of them at the same time. Like the car literally just accordioned, just collapsed on it.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah, and in a CRV. I mean, holy cow. Now you say 3 inches from death. What was there something, were you about to be impaled, or what was?
Yeah, so the entire car collapsed. So I'm talking like everything got pushed into me, the engine, the steering wheel, everything got pushed in. So even to get out, I had to basically, because the frame bent, I had to use my elbow and slam into the door a few times just to get out. And when I fell out, I fell into all the broken glass and all of that. And so middle, like we were 10 minutes to midnight, pitch black outside, summer night, 11:50 p.m. Nobody's around. It was a pretty crazy ordeal.
Now, were the horses impacted? Did they walk away, or were they injured, or what?
They died instantly. So one of them actually got flipped over. He literally like smashed onto the top of the SUV and went over mine. So like on my trigger warning, of course, but on my social media every year, I'll actually go to the site, and it's been really good to just reflect on some of the, when that started, it was pretty bad in the beginning, and now I'm pretty thankful for it. But there's pictures on my social media, and just to kind of remind myself of what I've been through, where I've come from, and where I'm headed.
You brought up something really interesting. So anybody knows a little bit about my story knows that I almost died 2.5 years ago. And there was 1 year I went back to a hospital in San Antonio, not to go in, but just to go by, because it was a place where I first woke up from the coma. And there was at least one person that just never understood, why would you go back there? And I would imagine they'd be asking you the same thing. Why do you go back to this site every year? What does it do for you?
Oh, I get the same thing, Craig. And so for the first few years, honestly, I would go, like my whole life flipped on its head, right? I ended up leaving my job. I had chronic pain I basically, I actually still suffer with a lot of the symptoms. I get
Yeah.
headaches that can incapacitate me from 15 minutes to 3 weeks. And so in the first few years, I would go and I would just mourn. I would reflect on life and I'd be like, man, this is my lot now, right? Here I am in my mid 20s. My life's wasting away. All that potential, all gone. And I would just sit there so depressed, barely making it poverty level, wondering what's going to happen. And as the years went by and things started to change, my attitude, my perspective did also. And so going to the accident now is actually a reminder for me of where I've been and honestly how good life has become versus what it was in the first few years.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, when I went back, when I woke up in that hospital, the whole world was bigger because everything for me was so small. I was confined in a bed. And I had to see what the world looked like from a healthier lens. I had to
Hmm.
see what that time and world. But I think for anybody that's been through something like what you've been through, it's also a way of going back and remembering where you started versus where you are.
Totally. One of the things, because again, in what I do, there's the business coaching side. So we're talking a lot of mindset, a lot of strategy, and then there's the consulting side, the systems and all that. But on the coaching side, one of the things I often remind people is I say, you don't have to hit two horses to go through pain, but you do get to change your perspective on the pain that you have gone through, whether that's business pain, relational pain, whatever it is. And so for me, I didn't honestly lean into that until probably about 4 or 5 years in. And so for the first 4 or 5 years, I was consumed with my pain. And it wasn't until I started to change my perspective that I recognized, just like you were saying, where I'm like, you know what? That I've got to see this from a different way. I've got to look at this different because I'm wasting away here.
Yeah. So do you still struggle with chronic pain?
Yeah, yeah. So 12 years later, I've still got the headaches. I've still got chronic pain. Again, a lot of the symptoms haven't changed. I've built systems into my life to mitigate the effects of those things, and I'm in a much healthier place emotionally. But yeah, the physical pain and the mental pain still lingers.
What are some examples of some systems that you built?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the biggest things that I learned is so I about a year and a half post accident, I quit my job, and I was in this place where I was like, I'm unemployable. Doesn't matter how smart I think I am, how qualified I think I am. Um, who's going to hire somebody that you don't know if you're going to show up to work? And so in this crazy roundabout way, I basically was kind of handed a business, took it, built it. But I started to realize that as quickly as I was adding clients, if I got in the room, I'd get the client. But as quick as I was adding them, I was losing them. And so I had to learn this valuable lesson that, my headaches aren't going away. So I've got to build systems that basically replace me in the business. And so examples of that were, I started to build out, structures, and I started to build out processes to easily document my work so that I could offload those onto first delegated services. So hiring a bookkeeper, right? Hiring, for an administrator, whatever, until I could actually afford to bring those people in house. And so I actually basically said, look, I need to create my life in a way that it's not time sensitive, right? Because sometimes I'd be good at 3 in the morning and I'd want to work at 3 in the morning. But if a client's expecting something earlier, well, that's not going to jive, right? So some of those systems were time management. They were delegation in essence, and really just automating a lot of things in my life so they weren't dependent on my availability.
Yeah. So were these, how did you build out a team? Sounds like a combination of a team and automations.
Yeah. So the first thing I did before I built out a team is I said, look, what of this can I automate? Right. Because I was barely making any money, couldn't afford to bring people on. So I said, can I use 5, 10, $15 tools online? Something like a Zapier. Can I automate some of these things to make my life easier? So I started to automate. And then as I was buying back time, I started to use that time to go generate some more revenue. And I was like, well, I can't hire a part-time or full-time employee, but maybe I can hire a service. And so I'd go pay a company, $150 a week for, whatever it was. I think it was like 7 or 8 hours of someone. And I would have them start to fill in gaps for me. And I was slowly just buying my time through automation and then delegation, and then eventually actually building out a team. And that path, like had I just gone down the road of delegation, I don't think I would have succeeded. Right. I had to create margin in my life. And so I think the automation and then the delegation really, really helped. And elimination was kind of my last step where I just said, look, there's things here that I'm wasting, that I'm being redundant about. And so that 3-step process, I think, really helped me. And it's integral to my business now.
And I think that's, in the automation, the one thing that I've learned about people is well-intentioned people can't do things perfectly repeatedly. And so it's not that and so early in my career, I worked in high volume manufacturing. And anytime you saw a human introduced into a repetitive task, you had an error rate. And the fact is, we have these machines that are really, really good at doing repetitive, predictable things. It's not where the humans excel.
Totally. Right. And so for me, it was identifying what are these things like, again, I could be knocked out days or weeks at a time. So simple things like, man, why am I not automating my finances? Right. Why are my all my bills and all these things not automated? Even client onboarding. Right. I'd meet with a client and then I was like, look, why don't I set it up and create, these easy access points so that the moment someone fills out an application, it auto generates a proposal, sends them payment. Why am I not automating payments? Just things that, again, seem so easy now. But when I started to add up, I was like, man, I am wasting 6 or 7 hours a week on these things. How can I decrease my administrative burden? And for me, it was really a matter of survival.
Well, and the buzz phrase today is AI. And there are people replacing their entire customer service with AI, and all that. What's your take on AI?
I love the example you gave where, when you introduce humans, naturally the error rate's going to increase. And so
Yeah.
for me, one of the ways I'm already leveraging AI and doing it for my clients is I'm saying, what are these, let's take any employee. Okay. Identifying first, what is a great way to leverage this employee? What's a good use of their time, their skills, right? Their talent. And when I figure that out, then anything that's not a good use of their time or something that's a really low return, I want to use AI for that. I want to automate for that. So I want to be put in a position that it's great for the business because I'm always getting the best rate of return. Also great for the employee. I want to
Yeah.
put employees in positions where they feel happy, satisfied. They're like, I'm doing things that are impacting. I can tangibly measure the impact of how I'm contributing to the organization. So I think leveraging AI in really identifiable ways to maximize ROI in both your people and your business, that's a really good place to start.
Are there some things you think AI is not good at?
Man, honestly, I think anything right now, I've really struggled, and I know people are getting better at it. And there's people that are much smarter than me, but I think anything that really features creativity or has any emotional quotient, I'd shy away from AI. Now, if you want to use AI to do, an initial draft, get a human in there to add that human tone, right? Add that creativity, that emotional quotient. Because I just, I've had people test things, and I'm telling you, I'm no wizard here, but I can tell the difference. I can read too, and I'll say, look, there's a pattern repeating itself here. This kind of reads mundane, reads cold. And so anything that's got creativity to it, if you're building a brand, I ran a marketing company for 10 years. And so AI to me, I look at it and I'm like, man, AI is fantastic to analyze my cold hard data. Tell me which campaigns are working. Tell me which of my systems need to get better. But when it comes to ad creatives, even tell me which ad creatives are effective. But when it comes to the creatives and it comes to actually doing great copy, I think right now that's best reserved for humans because I want to feel the warmth and the emotional connection of those things.
I interviewed one of the first episodes in the podcast, a guy named Ryan Dice, who he was just put out a book called Get Scalable. And he made the point, he's like, I wrote this before AI, so this is not AI written. And what was really interesting was right around that time, I was in the process of publishing 2 books. By the way, for those listening, do one at a time. Bad idea, do two at a time. But when I look at those two books, I really don't see how AI could write them. I don't think, I look at what was accomplished, and it's the creative, it's the human element in there. Yeah, presumably I could write enough prompts to get AI to write the books, but it would be shorter just to write the books.
Totally, right? It's funny. I was actually just with a client for an on-site, and they're starting to really delve into their personal brand. They're building a yoga health brand, and I threw this idea out where she finds it, her and her team find it exhausting to get all their ideas onto paper and go from there. And I said, look, a great use of AI for you might be, why don't you interview style record yourself dumping all this content, have AI go through it and just categorize everything you said. It's not going to be perfect, but even if it knocks out 70 or 80%, now you go in, make a few edits, huge save of your time, you brain dump, let AI do the kind of filtering, and then you can take your human element from there. And so
Yeah.
this idea with AI, similar to automation, to me, it's like I'm not trying to replace things per se. I'm actually just trying to become more effective. And
Yeah.
I'm trying to leverage AI to become more effective and more efficient.
Well, and something you tapped into there, I think one of the most powerful things AI does is it summarizes mass quantities of information. It takes more information than you or I could read in a lifetime and deliver a quick summary.
Oh, I mean, so when one of my clients, they run 3 law firms, and they were bringing their administrative assistants in and their executive assistants into meetings. And I was like, how much does your EA get paid? Okay. Our EA gets paid 70 grand. I'm like, that's about $35 an hour. How many meetings are there a week? 7 meetings. I'm like, you're looking at between 200 and 250 bucks a week on meetings. That's 10 to 12 grand a year spent on meetings. Next thing we threw an AI automation, otter.ai, starts joining every meeting. And we now just allocated 10 or $12,000 of the executive assistant actually going and leveraging more efficient tasks instead of being in these meetings. And that software cost, I think, $25 a month, and everybody's better for it. And so even if the AI is 80 or 85% effective, man, what would you do with an additional 10 to 12 grand of capital in your business every year?
Yeah,
So
exactly. Yeah, I mean, that's a nice little vacation.
totally.
One thing I've noticed about AI is it feels like the holy wars. I use AI every single day. This morning, I mean, we're recording this interview first thing in the morning, and literally before I got out of bed, I was sitting there with my laptop in bed using AI. I love AI, but boy, if I go out and I post anything negative or not even negative, but a limitation, things that we're talking about, I get pounced on. It's like it's like I just insulted the Pope or something.
Oh man. And you know what? I could be way off base here, but I feel like we go through these cultural cycles of technology every, 10, 15 years, whatever it is. It's probably shortening now the more we evolve. But, I even think of, the advent of the phone, of the cell phone. This idea that, people, while there was a large portion of the population that was excited, oh my gosh, calendar in my, email, BlackBerry the whole bit, email in my hand. There was also people who were just absolutely livid, the idea that this is going to ruin society. And any critique of these things, often, even for the people that are pro, I think can really rile people up. I've already seen that on LinkedIn and a few places. So I get what you're saying.
Well, and so going back to the human element that you were talking about, there's somebody who comments on my posts on LinkedIn, and I first one I looked at, I was like, that's a weird comment. And then the next one came through, and it's like a whole paragraph. It's not, like one or two sentences. It's an entire paragraph. And the next one comes through. I'm like, that's weird. And then eventually it finally clicked on, for me. If you have, LinkedIn Premium, it has a little AI tool and it will write things for you. But it doesn't feel warm. It doesn't pull, I believe this person's doing this because they're trying to endear themselves to me at some level, or they're trying to endear themselves to their audience, but it doesn't feel warm. It doesn't draw me into them.
and this is what I was saying earlier. It's my fear with leveraging AI in creative or emotional quotient switch situations is that not only will it not endear people to you, it might actually repel them, right?
Yeah.
Where you look at that and you're like, oh, come on, you're telling me that you didn't have the 7 seconds to actually just type an actual human rebuttal and try and engage with me, right? We're going to automate that. Whereas again, AI, whether good or bad, could be leveraged for things that don't capture that are so much more effective. Get AI to build your target lists on LinkedIn, right? Get AI to review mass scales of text. Get AI to automate A to Z, find the inefficiencies. But things like that require human touch, that have that emotional connection, man, let's keep that in the hands of humans.
Yeah. So you said something interesting. You said you get AI to create your target list on LinkedIn. So this is just purely self-serving. How do you do that? Because LinkedIn's real touchy about being scraped.
Yeah. So I mean, actually, one of the things I'll do, and oh man, I don't remember the tool I'm using, but basically, it's in my Chrome browser. What I'll do is I'll actually just have it scan my existing connections, and I'll have AI learn. Okay, so this is like the general. These are the three biggest areas biggest locations where all your followers come from. This is a lot of your people tend to be business owners or VPs. So now we're going to go and find things that mirror that and recommend those to you. And then what I'll do is I'll have someone on my team actually go vet that list, because again, if it's 70 or 80% correct, we've got 20% margin of error, but their time is so much better used vetting that list and building it. That would have taken an eternity. And so that has been a really, really good use of my time. And, then we kind of dumb that list down and I say, look, of this list, let's say it's 100 people, there's 10 people here that are super active on LinkedIn. I'm going to engage with these people often. The other 90, we'll throw those in the pipeline. We'll start to nurture them. We'll send connection requests. And so there's so many human elements, but for me, I'm a sucker for a workflow, Craig. So
Yeah.
I'll drop the workflow. And I think that the best thing you can do is when you get that visual representation is to say, okay, so which of these parts can I kind of slide AI into in my LinkedIn process? Which of the parts require human connection or a human element? And of those human element parts, which are the ones that I absolutely have to do and the ones I can outsource? And so I just try and apply that strategy everywhere.
Wow. So, and I mean, you mentioned earlier that you pivoted, that, the car accident put you on the entrepreneurial journey. And I mean, the stuff you're sharing is powerful. Is this, what does your current work look like? What are you doing currently in terms of leader, coaching and that sort of stuff?
Yeah. So I had a successful exit from my marketing business about a year and a half ago. And I I didn't know what I was going to do next. Had zero idea.
Yeah.
I told myself, said, look, I've worked quite a bit post accident. I deserve a bit of a break, and I don't know if you can relate, but I lasted about 4 days, and I was like, no, I got to start something. I can't do this.
That's funny you say that. Um, I'm sitting in the hospital. I can't walk. And I tell my wife I want my phone. And so from the hospital, I start reaching out to clients to letting them know, hey, I'm coming back. Now my team had been working with them. My team was amazing, kept the business running while I was in the hospital. But I have one client who actually visited me at the hospital, and he said, Craig, take as much time, we'll be here for you when you get back. Take as much time. I was like, I'll be back January 1st. And this was in October. And he's like, for reference, I was assuming you'd be back second quarter. And I said, Trent, if I'm not working by January 1st, I'm not going to be a nice person.
Oh man, I'm the same way. I can't just sit around, right? Like even like in pain, I'm like, I gotta do something. But it's funny that you mentioned that though, because I think that that's probably the one of the top three pain points for my clients. I was having a conversation with my second client I ever signed in this business, and I had said, hey, let me hit you straight. I was telling them about the first client that I had just signed,
Yeah.
and I said, let me hit you straight. You know my story. If something were to ever happen to you and you got taken out of the business for a month, what would your business look like? And the person just kind of smiled awkwardly, kind of gave it a laugh, and then was like, okay, if we're being honest, I wouldn't have a business left. And I said, well, then you don't have a business, you have a job. Because if you stop showing up to your job, you don't get paid. We should build you a business. And she said, yeah, let's do it. And that's how I landed my second client. And it's kind of under that guise that I've built much of this business coaching, which is a lot of the strategies, mindsets, helping these entrepreneurs push past their plateaus. And that second side where I say, look, I want to build a business because I had to do it that survives in spite of me, right? Where, whether it's pain or a desire to have financial freedom or time freedom that exists and serves people, whether or not your availability is always in question. And so that's been a tenor of what I do now, is helping business owners and entrepreneurs overcome those plateaus, get unstuck, but also recognize, hey, well, why are you still doing so much of this work, right? Why aren't we giving opportunities to people in your organization? Why aren't we scaling through delegation, automation, elimination?
Yeah. Well, and I think that's so powerful what you're bringing. And that was such a powerful point that you brought, that if you have to be in your business, what you have is a job, you don't have a business. And I know for me, when I woke up from my coma and my wife started telling me what my team had been doing in my absence, I was so incredibly proud. And, I think that's some of the vision for business owners. Your value is not in your unique knowledge that you and you alone possess. If you can build a team that does incredible things to help people accomplish things that they can't accomplish on their own, there's way more value. It's harder. It's
Oh,
harder to build
totally.
that team, but it's also way more valuable, and at least for me, way more rewarding.
Oh, 100%. And I think it goes back to leadership, right? It's this idea that I keep connecting with people on, where I say, look, systems are important. Systems, structures, they're important. SOPs, processes, they're important, but nothing's as important as people. And so if we build people, people will build business. And so this idea that one of the first things we target, I tell people all the time, I say, hey, do you have a leadership pipeline in your business? I don't care if you're 3 people, right? If it's you and 2 people, how are you building into them? How are you it's so easy to delegate tasks, but how often do we delegate responsibility,
Yeah.
right? Where we say, hey, I know that I can just say, hey, can you go take care of the grocery list? What I'm asking you to do is, can you take this task off my plate, workshop it, think of a better way to do it, and let me know make me feel comfortable the buck stops with you. And seeing people empower other people, I have not had a single person yet that I've worked with who has not been in a better spot by doing that. And so I just feel like it's such an important part of moving forward.
At least in the people that you work with, what are some of the barriers that you see that keep people from doing that, from delegating and empowering the people?
Oh, I think a big one is that people just don't know where to start, right? I think it goes back to that. It's very, very easy for us as humans. It's not hard to delegate a task, but I would argue that that's actually not delegation. You're just passing off the buck, right? But at the end of the day, you're actually not empowering that person. You're just managing them. Empowerment, I think, which is where people struggle and pushing past that, is this idea that I'm going to explain the why of what this thing is. I'm going to model it to them. I'm going to monitor them while they're doing it. And then I'm going to say, hey, just so you know, it's not your job to do everything. It's your job to make sure everything gets done. So now you start to do that for somebody else.
Yeah.
And again, if I can empower people with responsibility, then man, now someone gets to say, oh, so I can kind of make this my own. I can make this better. I can add my flavor. Let's say, hey, actually, yes, as long as we hit the goal and you operate within these parameters and these boundaries, absolutely. And so the biggest thing is moving people from just giving away tasks to empowering people with responsibility. I think it's been just a big shift in seeing people actually delegate properly.
There's somebody named Elena who works for me, and years ago she came up to me and she started talking, and I was listening, and she got done talking, and I said, let me see if I have this right. There was a problem. You identified the problem, you fixed the problem, and you're just here kind of updating me on what happened, and I don't need to take any action. She said, yes. I'm like, bless you.
The dream, the dream.
Yeah. So, and I think one thing that, at least one thing that I see in myself, this is a demon that I have to fight myself, is if I let go, they're not going to do it as well as me. How do you coach people through that? If I'm your client, how do you coach me through that?
I think if I'm being completely transparent with you, one of the reasons why my clients think about firing me on a weekly basis is this button that I push all the time. And so I was having a conversation with one of them recently, and I said, "Hey," and she brought this up. She's a perfectionist and she's an operations beast, and it's that perfectionism that enables her to be such a good operator, but it's also her downfall because she struggles to delegate. And I basically created this framework where I said, look, you're outputting 100% of your time and you're getting 100% of your output, right? If you delegate to somebody and they only get 70% of the output, you're focusing on the 30% failure. What I need you to realize is that it took you 20% of your effort to train someone to get 70% of the output. That's a 50% margin you just created. That's how you win in life. That's actually how you win in business. And you can exert more effort to keep refining that person and get them from 70 to an 80 or an 80 to a 90. But instead of focusing on the deficiency in their output, why don't you focus on the margin you just created?
Yeah.
And it was really, really hard for her. But as the biggest win for her that she started to realize was as she started doing it, she was like, oh my gosh, I'm getting my time back and things are still getting done. They're not getting done necessarily the exact same way I would do it, but they're still getting done. And now I have an opportunity to coach people to make them better people. And it's still leaving me with all this margin. And so that 20% to get 70, I can do that 5 times over. And hey, I'm no what math whiz, but you're going to come out quite ahead every single time.
No, absolutely. There was somebody who died recently, a guy named Daniel Kahneman, who he and his research partner introduced something called prospect theory. Just absolutely groundbreaking work. But one of the things that they highlighted was we feel the pain of loss way more than we feel the excitement of the gain. And so,
Hmm.
in that scenario you just described, you get obsessed about that 30% loss and miss the 70% gain. And it holds us back.
Totally. It's human emotion. And that's why I act as a hybrid between the coach and the consultant, because I also feel like there's a real emotional connection with my clients, right? I could sit here, I tell people all the time, I said, look, you could listen to podcasts, you could go online. A lot of the stuff that I do with my clients is not revolutionary per se, but it's that accountability and that human connection of being able to say, I want you to know that your perfectionism is not bad per se. It's actually what drives you to be a great operator. What I'm asking you to do is for us to take the next step. I need you to relinquish and just take that next step with me. Try a little something. And because we meet every week and we're in the trenches together, there's that accountability to say, I loved this. This scared me. This is what worked. I think this was really stupid. Whatever. Right. And so that consistent go at it, similar to like working with a personal trainer, is what I found is so effective in my clients because, man, I can also relate. I'm a bit of a control freak. The idea in the beginning of handing things off to people, I was like, this is my company. I've built this. These are my clients. And at the end of the day, I think I just eschewed the responsibility and kind of gave it away without realizing, oh, well, I can actually train and teach these people to care about these things just as much as I do.
Yeah. So, Matthew, we've gone like way over, and because the information you're providing is so incredibly powerful, and I could literally go another hour. I think you have so much wisdom to share, and obviously you help share this with other folks. How do people reach you if somebody heard something and that they want to carry this further? How do they reach you?
Yeah, I love connecting with people. You can go to my website, consultingbyprime.com, or you can look me up on LinkedIn, Matthew Sanjari, Sanjari. And I just love connecting with people. So give me a shout on there.
And I hope they reach out. I'm sitting there looking at the clock. I wanted to keep going because you're just really delivering so much powerful insight. I do hope people reach out to you because I believe you can make a big impact in their business. Matthew, thank you for being on Leaders and Legacies.
Great. Thanks for having me. It was just such a great living room chat.